Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I'm of course your host, Jack Knives. It's the final week of February, and as I was pondering how I could end this season, I was thinking about my top 5 dark romance lists about the concept of romance. And there's always been an element of romance that no one's ever really tapped into that much. And that is the bro/womances. What are those, you may ask, as if you don't know? Someone that you could see as the yin to their yang. You may have someone like that in your life, and you may know someone who has someone like that in their life. It's someone who shares the same gender, and yet they're not romantically interested in one another, but you look at it from afar and go, I could see it happening, and not feel any sort of way, good or bad. The bond is more strong than maybe most relationships, to be honest with you. I decided to take 3 bromances and 3 womances. I decided to take 3 womances and 3 bromances and combine them into a list based off of who I think is the best personally, but I wanted to use the scope of anime. These are my top 6 anime bro/womances.
Number 6.
Mihoshi and Kione from Tenchi Universe. Now, Kione didn't exist in the original season of Tenchi Muyo, but she was introduced in Tenchi Universe, which is the more popular series. And since then, she has made a staple of herself. Mihoshi is a fairly ditzy, dumb girl. To the point where, even though this is a reverse harem anime that Tenchi is, Mihoshi is the only one who is not really interested in Tenchi, but I don't think it's because she doesn't find him attractive. I think it's because she's too stupid to understand what a relationship is. Kione always has her back. She is always her partner. Not just her partner, but she's always there by her side. You really can't picture one without the other as far as just their bond together. A lot of that has to do with just their dynamic of the comedian and the straight man that has been played in so many comedies. But Kione is just doing her job. She just wants to be a Galaxy Police Patrol woman, and Mihoshi just so happens to be the daughter of the top of the bureau, so she's not only having the worst partner, but she's having basically the boss's kid, and she's also grows slowly over the series as an actual sisterhood. They become closer and they become best friends, and yeah, they kind of get irritating a little bit, but they don't overuse them. And they don't really have too much conflict as far as in the main story of Tenchi Universe. But when they do show up, it always does seem to bring this brightness about them where whatever is going on the side, you're very interested in to see what they're going to do next. And you really do feel that their bond is very, very strong, but also more leaning towards the sisterly aspect more than the romantic aspect. So I figured this would be a good starting point for our list.
Number 5.
Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha from the Naruto and Boruto series. Now hold on, before you all go 4th gear or Bankai on me, let me explain. Naruto and Sasuke have an extremely strong bond. They went from enemies to friends to brothers to even fatherly and leader in Boruto. Well, the reason I put them at number 5 is mainly because, unlike a lot of the character dynamics in the Naruto series, which I could have put a lot of them in this list, but they're dynamic. It always seems to be a perpetual cat and mouse. Sasuke is selfishly trying to be stronger and always doing things for himself, and Naruto always wants to keep the band together. And I think that toxic relationship is simultaneously working and yet not working for anybody. To the point where you're literally just like watching the series going, just let him go, dude. He doesn't want to be around you anymore. But you also understand where Naruto comes from and the bond that they share the experiences, the tortures, the mistreatments. You understand where each of their trauma comes from. You understand why they're the way they are, and you also understand that ultimately they're very similar and almost two halves of the same coin. You start thinking, well, maybe if Sakura had taste, she would actually fall for Naruto. Or you start thinking, what if this happened instead of that? What if Itachi had killed Sasuke? How would that have affected the village? What if certain elements throughout the series, you start seeing their dynamic being ingrained in the foundation of the series, and you realize, oh, they weren't just two characters that were really popular and weren't just, obviously the series is called Naruto, so obviously he's the main character, but in a lot of ways, they're almost an equal footing with each other, and that dynamic that they have is a very strong bond, but it didn't just progress that way. It almost forced itself into being that way. And yes, there are a lot of elements of them being somewhat closer than even to their wives. As they got older, they got kind of closer to each other than they did to even like their wives and children, which is just odd. But hey, who am I to judge? And that's why I felt I should put them at number 5.
Number 4.
Kei and Yuri from Dirty Pair and Dirty Pair Flesh.
So this goes way, way back into anime fandom. And Dirty Pair, despite their namesake, it's not a hentai. It's a space adventure series about two very attractive women who are basically bounty hunters. Yes, they're scantily clad, but what I like about them is you can't really picture one without the other. Realistically, when you hear the term dirty pair, you know who you're talking about. In the anime community, they are basically the ultimate of sisters. And because of that, they have this kind of sexual tension where they live with each other. They actually travel together. They go on adventures together. And each adventure becomes more and more ludicrous and more kind of weird. You could see them in a relationship. You could see them wanting to be intimate with each other. You could see them using their own sexual transgressions to get their way. And you could see little things that they do that make the series just so much more enjoyable and funny. As time has gone on, yes, people may see this as a risque series to put on a list like this. But honestly, when I think about concepts of bromances and womances, I think about a bond. I think about something that, again, goes back to that, could you see them? Probably. And yes, definitely with Kei and Yuri, you definitely see the sexual tension between them. I felt that it was only fair to put them right here on this list.
Number 3.
Yusuke Urameshi and Kazuma Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho.
Yusuke and Kuwabara started off as enemies. Not just enemies, they actually went to rival high schools together. In a system of delinquency in the Japanese culture where you may have heard of the term Yankee or Yankees, where they tried doing their hairstyle in that pompadour-esque style where they can't really pull it off because their hair is long, so it looks kind of like a bun. Well, that's where Kuwabara's hair comes from. But they started off as rivals and kind of just progressed from there. But from the first episode, where Yusuke dies, before any of the adventures of the series, there was only a handful of people that actually showed up to Yusuke's funeral. And one of the more somber moments was Kuwabara. Kuwabara actually showed up to Yusuke's funeral. And he felt like he had lost a friend, even though they weren't really friends. And that's where their foundation of their relationship started. And for them to progress from that, and then Kuwabara to not only becoming part of Yusuke's crew, but probably the second strongest only to him, and maybe Hiei at full form, but they each brought something different. You saw Kuwabara at the beginning of the series as this kind of goofy character, but he really did make a name for himself and did actually a lot of damage. His style was so different from Yusuke's, and he brought a different element than anyone else could have ever expected. His entire style was based around you didn't know what to expect from him. And Yusuke's was always hit first, ask questions later. And that dynamic has always resonated together. It's so funny because he never called him Yusuke. He always called him Urameshi. He was the only one who just called him Urameshi, because maybe it was a matter of respect for his last name, or maybe it's because he always just saw him like, that's just how I see you, you know? It's like just this dynamic between them that you could see this loving care. They obviously wouldn't say anything out loud because, you know, too macho to say anything about their feelings, but there are really hard-hitting moments where they actually have some genuinely heartbreaking emotions, and to see characters that are so like stone-faced. And it's also heavily implied that Kuwabara comes from an abusive household, and so does Yusuke. Like, I think Yusuke's mother is like a drug addict, and then like Kuwabara has like an absentee mom, and like his older sister takes care of him. So like they also share that kind of pain. And I think that kind of helps build up to their bond rewatching the series years later, where they each kind of have more of a strategic style of fighting, but it's very different from one another. I think that bond is a lot stronger than Naruto and Sasuke, in my personal opinion. How many other characters can you really think of where they see a guy die and feel like genuine like remorse about it, the fact that they're dead, and, you know, still move forward from seeing that, you know, just seeing death on a constant basis and just going, oh, okay, like, okay, I have to absorb this, I have to work through this. And they're teenagers. It's another factor people don't think about. They are teenagers. They are freshmen in high school. These are like stuff that would be hard for an adult, let alone a teenage delinquent. And I think that shared trauma makes them just this perfect dynamic of these two rivals and two brothers that are just so great as a duo.
Number 2.
Nana K and Nana O from Nana.
For those that haven't seen Nana, it's a very female-centric series that deals with a lot of heavy drama and kind of this element of fashion. It also deals with a lot of dynamics of depression and outward appearance reflecting the inner feelings of one another. But I've never seen a series that deals with this relationship of two seeming strangers and it feeling genuine. Like, before the series started, neither of them knew each other. The only thing they had in common was their first names. But they're so different. They're so vastly different. One's a punk rocker, one's a fashion Lolita. One likes the dark, one likes the light. It's so almost stereotypical, but they both have elements that they bring to the table. They both bring this kind of outward introspective of their lives, this kind of looking forward and yet not being able to be in the present. So one of them is very much in the center of this inner turmoil that they have to try to just get by every day. And the other one is just trying to move forward and not deal with their problems. And I think that's kind of interesting that they have this dynamic of trauma, but not in a depressing way, in a genuine way, like a seriously adult way. And you wouldn't expect that from a series like this. You really would not expect them to be handling something like that in a series like this. There's a lot about this show that I really can't get into because there's a lot about it that you just kind of have to go into. Just kind of have to just give it a chance, and it's definitely one of the best, probably in my opinion, the best version of a romance that I've ever seen in an anime. That this sisterly bond that doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like they have to be in a dynamic situation together. Originally, when I was drafting this list, I thought of putting like the Sailor Scouts, but then I really thought about it and I go, no, because they're kind of a force dynamic. You know, they're given powers that just so happen to connect to each other. So that same dynamic would have happened regardless of who they were. Nana K and Nana O are two strangers, essentially lost in a mental battlefield, and they just so happen to run into each other. And the one thing they share that started them on their journey was sharing the same name. And that's it. And the rest is just building from that. It's crazy because you think about a lot of relationships you may have had in your life, or I've had in my life. I could speak from my own experience, that started from simply sharing an interest, simply sharing a minor little thing, and just becoming closer than anyone can think of based off of just that little thing. And I think that's a big element to what makes a bromance or a womance important. But then you ask yourself, if this is number 2, what could possibly be number 1? Well, let's get to it.
Number 1.
Son Goku and Krillin from Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball Super.
I'm going to say this once and for all. Goku and Vegeta are not a bromance. I'm sorry, but they're not. The concept of a bromance is you started as rivals, and then you became friends, and then you became stronger than friends. Vegeta and Goku aren't really friends at all. And yes, I've watched all of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super. They're not friends, okay? They're rivals and acquaintances who get along at best. They share a common ancestry and they share a common blood lineage, but that is it. Goku has one and only one best friend, and that is Krillin. Krillin has been his friend from the beginning, from Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z. And if you don't believe me, Dragon Ball from the beginning, when they first started, when they first met each other, Goku and Krillin, Goku really was just this fun little... Krillin came from a monk's temple and went to Master Roshi to become a great warrior and couldn't understand why he would pick this little kid. Krillin came from a place of abuse, a place of hatred where they didn't like him. They just didn't like him. They couldn't stand him and they mistreated him. Goku cared about him. He didn't even know him and he cared about him because that's Goku. And that dynamic, they trained together. They learned together. They fought together. They raised together. Goku, as a child, held Krillin dead in his arms. His corpse in his arms. The first time Krillin ever died was as a child. Imagine losing your best friend as a little kid, all because of a mistake you made. That's power and dynamic of Goku and Krillin's bond. In fact, have you ever really thought about why Goku became a Super Saiyan? It wasn't because Frieza enslaved a planet. It wasn't because Frieza killed the Saiyans. It wasn't even because he killed Vegeta, or he hurt his kid, or his other rival Piccolo. No. Goku became a Super Saiyan because Frieza killed Krillin. And Goku knew, as dense as he was, that once you die, a dragon can only bring you back once. So in his mind, his friend's gone forever. His best friend is gone forever. That's what triggered him. That's what set the whole Super Saiyan thing into motion. And not only that, there's also elements where, even in the later series of Dragon Ball Z, where he trusts Krillin to watch after his kids. He trusts Krillin to do things in the Android Saga, in the Buu Saga. He trusts Krillin more than anyone. Why? Because he's his best friend. He's the one person he relies on more than anyone. He trusts him more than he probably even trusts Chi-Chi, to be honest. And Krillin tries justifying his relationship. In fact, Krillin is essentially a surrogate father and brother to Gohan, his son. You think that's just a coincidence? And when Goku died, who looked over Goten besides Gohan? Krillin and Android 18. They were surrogate, like, godparents to him. Like, this is not... It's insane that people, like, try to compare the relationship between Goku and Vegeta and Goku and Krillin. Goku and Krillin are an actual bromance. They're actually bonded for life and beyond life. In afterlife, they're bonded. Who did Goku pick for the Tournament of Power? Krillin. He picked Krillin before he picked Frieza. Before he picked all these aces in the hole, he picked Krillin and a few other people first. But Krillin was always one of his top picks because he knew how good Krillin was. He trusted Krillin to be able to pull things out of nowhere. He knew Krillin could protect his son. He knew Krillin could protect him, and he knew what a true bond is. That is why Goku and Krillin are the best bromance in all of anime. But those are just my opinions. I want to know what you think in the comments. And yeah, this was kind of fun, even though I'm not really in the romantic mindset. You know, it was kind of fun to do something this kind of weird and interesting. But starting next week, it's back to business as usual. Till then, I'll see you next time.